Good morning. It is 10 o'clock and it is time for our once in 2 weeks virtual information session about the coronavirus. We are really excited today to talk with you all about housing insecurity, knowing your rights and resources. And specifically, we are excited to welcome our guest speaker, Gray-Ziba. She's the attorney at the Legal Aid Society in Louisville, who's going to explore a conversation with us about the growing housing crisis related to COVID-19. This conversation will unpack the causes of housing crisis and explore what people need to know to keep themselves and their loved ones safe in the event they face eviction. Ashley will also share key housing security resources for older adults and caregivers. So thank you for being with us, Ashley. We will introduce you a little bit more formally in a minute or so. So before we give our update from our medical director, I would love for you all to just type in the county in the chat that you represent, either living in the county or working in the county, so that we can keep track of our reach. And with that, we want to make sure everyone knows we're going to keep the microphones on mute. And I'm going to start by asking Dr. Furman to give us our update from the medical director.
Hi, I'm Christian Furman. Yeah, I'm the medical director here at the Traeger Institute. So welcome everybody. And I just want to give a few of the updates with the numbers first. So in the state of Kentucky, we have 48,396 cases total and 933 deaths. In the United States, there's 6,118,204 cases confirmed and deaths are 186,348. So it's, we're in the middle of the pandemic and there's a lot of different moving parts. One part I want to give an update on is the nursing home. In the nursing homes, we are doing testing, surveillance testing of all the staff, and it's based on the positivity rate at each in your local, in the local area. So if you have a greater than 10% positivity rate, the staff are being tested 2 times a week. If it's 5 to 10%, it's 1 time a week, and it's less than 5%, it's about 1 time a month. And so Jefferson County, the positivity rate is like 9-point-something%. And so, I'm medical director at Presbyterian Home, and we're testing our staff once a week. We were testing twice a week, and now we've gone to testing once a week. This Saturday is Derby, and so happy Derby week, everybody. The Derby is not having any, it's just, no one is going to be attending the Derby. They're going to have the race, but that's it. So we're trying to do everything possible to keep everybody safe and limit exposures. School a lot of the private schools are in person or hybrid. Most of the public schools are online with the non-traditional instruction. Most schools will probably open totally in person or maybe some hybrid at the end of the month. It's just a moving target. But I just want to kind of acknowledge that schools have opened, colleges have opened. All of them are doing it a little bit differently, but it's just put another layer additive stress on everybody. It's been good, I think, for a lot of people to get back to normal, kind of a normal, but the stress of, grandparents that are raising grandkids, or a lot of the grandparents are the ones that are doing the non-traditional instruction at home with the grandkids. A lot of people are having to balance school and work, and so some people can't do both. So we're losing some employees in some of our companies because they're having to stay home with their kids for school. So just keep that in mind and just show compassion for everybody, because I think everybody has another layer of stress at this point. Voting, I just want to remind everybody, you can request your absentee ballot, and the state of Kentucky is doing absentee ballots, and those are now available. And I think that's really it. So I'll be available for questions as we go, and just everybody stay safe. Make sure you keep wearing your mask, stay 6 feet away, wash your hands, and we should be able to kind of get back to a little bit more normal, follow those rules. So.
Thank you, Christian. I appreciate the update. Now I have the privilege to introduce Ashley Gray-Ziba, attorney of the Legal Aid Society in Louisville. She's a staff attorney in the intake unit. Previously, she worked at the International Center at U of L, and before that, she served as a Foreign Service Officer for the U.S. Department of State. She and her husband own a small restaurant in Louisville, and they have 2 children. She enjoys traveling and listening to music, and she's a native of Danville, Kentucky. Ashley, welcome, and we are ready to listen to what you have to say.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am very happy to be here to talk about Legal Aid Society. I'll give a brief overview of what we do at Legal Aid Society, and then specifically we'll talk about evictions. We'll go through a little hypo and see, hopefully we can learn about resources that are available to everyone. Legal Aid Society was founded in 1921, so we're almost 100 years old. We're celebrating next year, and we are a nonprofit law firm. So that means we do not charge for our legal services. We have a staff of about 50 people, and I just met, I believe, two new paralegals Friday via Zoom. So that's been interesting. We are hiring new people due to the pandemic. I think we're probably one of the few that's increased our staffing due to the pandemic and just being busy. And then we employ, or we work with volunteer attorneys. So even though we only have maybe 28 or 30 attorneys now, we have a host of attorneys that do pro bono work with us and serve communities as well. I'm glad you all started typing in the chat where you're from. I see a lot of Jefferson counties. We're located on 4th and Muhammad Ali Boulevard downtown. Even though most of us are working from home, we're generally closed to the public right now. But we serve 15 counties. So Jefferson County, Henry County, LaRue County, all the way down to Grayson, Marion County, Spencer County, Washington counties, etc. So if you have a case outside of Jefferson County, we can still assist, or we can refer your case to another organization that also can provide legal services. So if your case is in Fayette County, no problem. We can refer it to Legal Aid of the Bluegrass. Again, our services are always free. We do not charge for anything. The type of services that we provide at Legal Aid range very greatly. I actually practice in our intake unit, and our intake unit handles cases that we traditionally would think of as elder law cases, but I don't like to call it elder law because I think everyone should have a will. You don't need to be at a certain age or stage in life to start thinking about making a will. But we practice those life planning documents. So wills, living wills, power of attorneys. We also do nursing home discharges. So thank you for sharing about nursing home cases. A lot of people don't know that we assist clients becoming Medicaid eligible. So for example, if they need a QIT, which is a qualified income trust or Miller trust, to become Medicaid eligible to remain in a nursing home, because nursing homes cost $7,000 a month, and maybe your pension and SSI is $3,500 a month. How are you going to, qualify for Medicaid and pay the difference, right? So we would work with setting up those documents. And if anyone gets a discharge from nursing home, we also would represent clients for that. Right now, there is a moratorium on nursing home discharges or nursing home eviction cases. So we don't see people leaving the nursing homes really right now. We do see clients going into the nursing homes right now during this time. So we are doing a lot of those trusts, I said, to help them qualify for Medicaid. So we just hired also in our office an elder law attorney. And so the elder law attorney is mainly focusing though on elder abuse issues. So that's maybe important for everyone here to know. Some other cases that we do are guardianship, government benefit cases. We have an economic consumer unit. They handle bankruptcies, expungements, tax controversies, small claims, those type of economic consumer cases. And we see an incline in those cases right now, just because the economy is not that great and there's a lot of unemployment right now. Family law cases, those are your typical divorce, custody, domestic violence cases. We have a veterans unit that handles pretty much anything that a veteran may need an attorney for or legal issue. And then we have a nonprofit entity that helps anyone that's working with 501c3. So if you need help setting up a 501c3, that's something that we could do. Lastly, I'm going to talk about housing. Our housing unit focuses primarily on landlord-tenant issues, evictions, and foreclosures. So I'm going to give us a hypothetical to work with. And essentially, we have a friend that was laid off from work from a chain retail store in late February. And this was basically because the company decided not to renew its lease and decided to close. And the friend put in several applications for employment at other stores, but has not had any callbacks. So we have a friend that's unemployed. They're trying to look for a job now because their previous employer closed recently, but they haven't got any callbacks. Now the COVID-19 has hit, it's March now. The friend applied for unemployment benefits and initially got approved for unemployment benefits. However, the unemployment benefits were not enough to pay for their utilities. In April, our friend received a letter from the unemployment office stating that their unemployment benefits were being canceled and their case is pending review and is being investigated. The friend thinks this has something to do with stealing their identity last year, but has been unable to talk to anyone from the unemployment office. So they tried calling the unemployment office, they've tried making an appointment online, and they haven't been able to get through to anyone. The friend is thankful that the governor has put a moratorium on evictions because they're unable to pay their $700 monthly rent. The friend believes that the landlord has not responded to a small leak in their apartment because they haven't paid rent since April when their unemployment benefits stopped. They have called numerous times to complain to the landlord. It is now September 1st, and the friend has just been served by the sheriff's office with some documents that state they must show up to court via Zoom on September 17th at 10 a.m. So how can we help our friends? I know it was a long scenario, but that's kind of a typical scenario that a client would walk into and face and give us details about. So what can we do to help them?
So Ashley, are you asking us to kind of give you feedback, or are you going to tell us?
Yeah, I mean, what are your initial thoughts? What issues, I'm asking everyone kind of, what are the issues they see that the friend needs help with?
Well, it sounds like they're going to get evicted, right? Because they don't have a job and they can't pay the landlord. But the governor now has a moratorium on eviction, so they won't get evicted, right?
So they've gotten a notice about eviction. So it sounds like there's a case. We'll start with that one. What else? What are some issues you saw in that scenario or hypo?
And the person does not have a job, right? They're out of a job.
Right, no job.
I wonder if Barbara Gordon wants to comment on that, because that's sort of in her alley.
Yeah, I was gonna also say that it also seems like the person has issues in their apartment or their home that they're renting from, like the leaky, I don't know if it was a faucet or ceiling. I can't remember which it was, but there were some issues with the structure. So that needs to be addressed.
Right, so there's this leak also that they reported, and the landlord isn't doing anything, and now there's mold. So there's some safety issues. What else did you spot in that problem?
And Amy Crittenden said in the chat, looking it up here, are you saying it's a scam? Is that what you're saying, Amy? Maybe I'm not understanding exactly your chat. Yeah, so wondering if the paperwork served. Oh, okay, the paperwork served was a scam.
Okay.
So Amy wants to talk, so I'm going to unmute Amy. Amy, you're unmute now. So do you want to give your comment on that, or tell us a little bit more?
Well, just with our scenarios with working with the geriatric community, we're always hyper-focused on what could be a potential scam. And if all those scenarios are played out to where the moratorium is already under effect, that's just a fear tactic. How, I'm not sure who served, the sheriff's department served that. They should know that there is that in place already. So it just sounds like an overall scam to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else? We'll come back to it. I'm going to read a quote for you to think about. It comes from the book Evicted by Matthew Desmond. And he essentially, this quote says, "It's hard to argue that housing is not a fundamental human need. Decent, affordable housing should be a basic right for everybody in this country. The reason is simple. Without stable shelter, everything else falls apart." So it's something to think about when it comes to safety, stability, security. It happens at home. And how can people be healthy at home if they have no home? So we're going to go back to the scenario, to our friend here in a second, but I just kind of want to paint a picture of what the housing crisis looked like in February, before the governor's state of emergency, before COVID-19 really hit us. And we know that most people did not have more than $400 in their account or in their savings to deal with any type of emergency. So when a global pandemic hits and people are unemployed or can't get unemployment benefits, where is the emergency resources going to come from? Because most of us are living paycheck to paycheck. There's also another study that says that in no county in the United States is the US median income for a 2-bedroom apartment affordable to anyone earning minimum wage. So before COVID-19, we had pretty much wages stagnant, but yet rent prices increasing. In Kentucky specifically, we have 44% of renters who are cost burdened. And what that just means is that more than 44% of Kentuckians are paying more than 30% of their paycheck for rent. And there's another quote in the book that I was reading from Evicted that says, in this house, the rent eats first. And so a large chunk of people's paycheck is just towards having a roof over their head, right? Let alone paying medical bills, utility bills, food, childcare, you name it. You know, it's not much left to deal with sometimes. In Jefferson County, that's nearly 54,000 households. So that's a lot of people who are cost burdened by their rent right now. Also in Louisville, we have double the national rate for eviction. So eviction rate nationally is about 2.3%. And in Louisville or Jefferson County, it is 4.8%. And then in Fayette County, it's about the same. It's 4.6%. So double the eviction rate nationally here in Louisville. And this is all pre-COVID, right? People living paycheck to paycheck, not having money in their savings, already dealing with a shortage of housing. Louisville Metro Public Housing, right, which is the agency in charge of finding low-income housing in Jefferson County, has a 5-year waiting period. So for people who can't pay their rent and need affordable or low-income housing, they may find something at a shelter or may not. They may have something available in Section 8 in 5 years. So it's kind of bleak, the situation concerning housing before March. Now it's March, right? April, May, June, July, August, September, we still are dealing with this. In Kentucky, we have a backlog of unemployment claims. So people have filed for their unemployment because they were laid off for whatever reason, and they may or may not have received it. The $600 a month for unemployment benefits, I believe, was extended for a couple of weeks, but it's only weekly, but it's only $400 now. So the average rent in Kentucky is about $780. So you can do the math and see how much income you have, subtract that from your monthly rent, what you're supposed to be left over with. It's estimated by a Stout that 48% of renter households in Kentucky are facing eviction. So when I talked to our supervising attorney that handles eviction cases, he had said that there are about 100 cases pending in court right now every day, or that are heard in court every day, just on the housing eviction docket. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m., there is a docket for eviction cases. And a given day, there are about 100 cases that are being heard. So that's a lot. So let's go back to our friend, our hypo, and talk specifically about what our friend is facing and the challenges that they are going through. So someone had mentioned, obviously sounds like they're getting evicted. They haven't paid the rent. Our friend admits this. They haven't received their unemployment benefits since, I think, April was the last time. So they stopped paying their rent in May. So it's May, June, July, August, 4 months behind. It's now September. Usually rent is due on the 5th of the month. So now probably looking at 5 months now, right? So they're facing an eviction. That's probably the main issue in that scenario, is that they have an eviction. And when the sheriff comes to your house and serves you a summons, usually people call us and they don't know what the paperwork is. And so that's why that scenario sounds like a scam. So I usually have people read it to me and say, at the very top in the right corner, it should have like a division. It should have the county. It should have, what does that say? What does that look like? Is there a case number? And also as an attorney, we have access to court records. Give me your last name. Let me see if I can find what we call a forcible detainer, right? That means that the landlord has filed an eviction in court. And as of August 25th, the moratorium has been lifted on renters not paying rent. So as of last week, landlords have been filing for eviction cases. And it is possible that our friend received this forcible detainer. That's actually the legal name for it, for an eviction. It doesn't, when the sheriff comes to your house and gives it to you, it doesn't say eviction notice, it says forcible detainer. So that's the words that we would look for. We would ask them, we would go and search our court records to see if we can see a forcible detainer action for our friend, and look and see. So they're facing evictions. The moratorium is lifted. People in Jefferson County, all 120 counties now are hearing eviction cases for non-payment of rent. The other issue you all mentioned and spotted was that they have no job, right? They're unemployed. So what about their unemployment benefits? They were receiving them, and then there was like, they got a letter saying, no, they're not receiving them anymore. So that is a case that we would look at actually for unemployment benefits to see what is going on. So that is a case you could tell them to call legal aid as well, not just for the eviction case, but also for the unemployment insurance case. Why did your unemployment benefits stop in April? That's something that you have a right to, essentially. And so that is a case that we would look at and that you would want to refer your friend to say, hey, unemployment benefits, they have to, give you an administrative hearing if they just cut off your benefits for, you have a right to that. Does the letter say about asking for a review? Did it give you a deadline? Usually it's 20 days to respond or 30 days. Call legal aid. They are also now doing unemployment insurance claims. The other issue y'all spotted very good was like this leak and a safety issue. Maybe the landlord is doing some kind of retribution because he hasn't received his rent. That's also an issue. So there's kind of two things that they could do. One, we generally recommend this issue is to call code enforcement. 311 is an easy number to remember and to call. Code enforcement can get out there, especially if there's mold. Mold has serious health consequences if it stays in someone's apartment or in their housing conditions. If there's a leak, it can only worsen, particularly if people have breathing problems, asthma issues, things like that. So that is one issue that we would want to work with. Also, that's usually code enforcement can encourage landlords to fix it, right? if you don't fix this, we are going to fine you or, you know, shut it down because it's in violation of health regulations. Usually that is a motivating factor. If not, then legally we can look at some other issues, perhaps terminating the lease, but that's not always easy for our clients or our friend to do. They can't just pick up and leave and go somewhere else. So it's something to kind of work out with your friend of like, do you have other housing options that are realistic to go to? Y'all mentioned the paperwork being a scam. I think it's probably a legit eviction since the sheriff came. But that is typically, you know, how our clients come to us is they say, we got some paperwork, we don't know what it is. And it's our job to kind of figure it out and make sure no one's missing anything that's, you know, important or, you know, especially when it comes to court dates, because failure to show to court, generally the judge just dismisses the case and doesn't hear it again. You just lose out because you didn't show up. So it's important for us to look at that. And like I mentioned before, we have a senior or elder law attorney now in our, on staff. And so they are looking at a lot of elder abuse issues because people call them, they buy things they don't mean to buy, get tricked into contracts. Things are sent all the time to them saying, you know, we need your social security number for this, and they think it's legit and it's not. So that is something that's really important. And I think you guys are great to pick up on that. So as far as the law is concerned, there's a quote from another book I want to read you. It's called The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. And it's written by Richard Rothstein. I believe he's out in California. And this book doesn't paint a great picture of Louisville. I mean, it's about all of the United States, but he talks about Louisville, particularly when it comes to segregation, busing issues. He mentions the story of Carl and Ann Braden, if you haven't heard of them, who buy a house for Mr. Wade, who was a Black veteran in Shively that needed a house. And, you know, at the time, Shively was predominantly white. And so the house that they bought was bombed. So he doesn't paint a good picture of Louisville. But anyways, he has a quote that says, just like Supreme Court justices, we as a nation have avoided contemplating remedies because we've indulged in the comfortable delusion that our segregation has not resulted primarily from state action and so on. We conclude there is not much we are required to do about it because once entrenched, segregation is difficult to reverse. The easiest course is to ignore it. And so he really does a lot to highlight the history of laws and policies that were implemented across the United States, from redlining all the way up to gentrification that has disproportionately affected Black people. And in Jefferson County, Black and brown people are disproportionately affected right now due to the housing crisis. Black households in Jefferson County rent twice as much as white households. So they account for a higher percentage of people who are renting their houses and thus are facing an eviction crisis. So let's talk about some resources that we can give our friend or to anyone we know that may be having these problems. So obviously, I want to recommend Legal Aid Society. It's where I work and where I'm representing right now. Our main number is 502-584-1254. and you're generally going to ask for the intake unit to see if you're going to qualify for our services. So you can always send them to us and we will screen for eligibility. Generally speaking, someone is eligible if they are 200% below the poverty guidelines or if they are above the age of 60. So we have an exception and some grant money and things like that. That's kind of above my pay grade, that we can help people above the age of 60, even if they are above 200% of the poverty guidelines. And in general, there can be other exceptions. So I always just say call and just, you know, let's just run it through, right, and see. So Legal Aid Society is going to be the first place I recommend because we can spot the issues very quickly. And if it's not an issue that we can assist with, we generally do referrals. So if it's a referral to the Human Relations Commissions because we think it's a housing discrimination case, we'll do that because we don't do discrimination cases. If it's finding financial resources, we now have a paralegal who can work with Metro government to find them financial resources to help them pay for their back rent. Normally, we did not handle cases that payment of rent was the issue and the only issue. But because there are so many cases pending, up to 60,000, they believe in Jefferson County alone, where landlords could file for evictions, we have decided to take all of those cases. We also know, just as lawyers, what to look for. So if an eviction is illegal, we can spot that. So for example, did our friend get a notice to vacate? She didn't mention that in the story to us. And so the law says now that the landlord must provide a 30-day notice before filing eviction. So 30 days ago, did that person get something on their door saying, you're late from May's rent, June's rent, July's rent? If not, that is something that we could challenge in court, right? No notice to vacate. Other things that we would look for is if the mortgage, the landlord had a mortgage that was in forbearance. So the landlord wasn't paying their mortgage because they had a forbearance. They had a loan or a mortgage that was protected under the CARES Act. So why are they evicting someone when they didn't have to pay their mortgage? So those are things that we would look for to try to fight an eviction. So the other thing that I think that's important is that the Supreme Court, when I say the Supreme Court, I'm talking about the Kentucky Supreme Court, has issued an order basically saying that late fees around paying rent, those are canceled. We're not charging people late fees. So, you know, your $50 a month late fee, remove that from their bill. And that's from March, end of March through, I think, end of July. The Kentucky Supreme Court said, you know, don't charge people late fees. The other thing is that the Kentucky Supreme Court said concerning eviction cases is that essentially people need to go to mediation. Normally as an attorney, when I go to mediation, I have, you know, my client, and then there's the opposing side, and we sit in front of a table and they say, okay, I want the kids this weekend and then every other weekend, and then we can alternate. And the other parent goes, no, let's do 1 week on, 1 week off. And, you know, you come to an agreement of what parenting or custody looks like for this family. This mediation is a little non-traditional. It's really to give both the landlord and the tenant or the renter information about resources that are available. So you're behind on rent. What are financial resources that we can catch you up to? And so the court won't evict people the first time they're in court. They'll say, okay, go to mediation, learn about the resources, see if you guys can come up with a payment plan for the, the other month rent or something like that. Then come back in 14 days and we'll figure it out. So some of the resources that are available, if you take this website down, it's called stopmyeviction.org. And that is primarily for Jefferson County residents. But there's some good information there, I think, for the state as well. So stopmyeviction.org. Our information is on there, as well as how to apply for financial resources. Team Kentucky Fund, I believe they set aside 15 million, 12 million, I forget, for non-payment of rent. So it will link to the website, how to apply for a Team Kentucky Fund. And that's for anyone, right, in all of 120 counties across the state. In Louisville, there is the Office of Resilience and Community Services. So people can call the neighborhood place. Again, if you go to that website, stopmyeviction.org, they'll have Louisville Metro government's contact number. That number is 502-997-6636. If you want to take that number down. And that's to apply for rental assistance just in Jefferson County. So if you're behind on your rent in Jefferson County, you want to check out a neighborhood place. You can go to stopmyeviction.org, find that number. You can call neighborhood place 502-977-6636. And Louisville Metro government has set aside $21.2 million in funds for rental assistance. So if we don't refer you, you can always go to stopmyeviction.org. You can call them or you can apply online yourself. Lots of options for people. Additionally, the Louisville Urban League has a fund. I'm not sure how much it is for Louisville residents, but if you go to their website, you'll see it. It's just LUL.org. That's LouisvilleUrbanLeague.org. One of the benefits about them is that they've been able to issue checks like same day, and Metro government takes more than 2 weeks to issue a check. So, if it's something like your landlord is not kind of negotiating with you on or something like that, then maybe give them a call or check out their website. Also, our friend was behind in utilities, they had mentioned. I don't know if anybody caught that. So LAHI is a good organization to refer people to. Again, it's on stopmyeviction.org, but their number is 502-991-8391. So actually today, September 1st, the moratorium has lifted on LG&E payments that are behind. So people who are behind with their utilities, particularly LG&E, they could have utility shut off coming. And we know that's very important for people who are working from home, taking care of kids. I heard people taking care of grandkids, doing the NTI so other people can work, having AC or heat or whatever they need, internet connectivity to be able to access the classroom is very important. So LAHI just stands for Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, is where we would, you can find resources to help people behind on their LG&E bill. I mentioned code enforcement 311. So if there's housing conditions, landlords are not being responsive for repairs, that's a good number to call. And then lastly, I want to mention a website called KentuckyRenterHelp.org. It's just KY renterhelp.org. That is a website from Kentucky Equal Justice Center. And they do more advocacy, policy work. What are some laws, ordinances that we should be looking at to assist, you know, our community? And I think it's just good if people are looking to maybe write their representative or something like that to say, hey, what's going on with, you know, the pandemic and people losing their homes. You can put in your information. It'll create like a template that you can, you know, essentially send to your representative or give you talking points about maybe some issues that you want to start thinking about and, you know, advocating policy. At Legal Aid, we don't advocate any policies. We can kind of tell you like how it affects our community, but we, as a, you know, we're not affiliated with any political organization or anything like that. So we're just a nonprofit and we'll serve anyone that meets our eligibility. So we can't really advocate, but those are some resources if I think just the general public wants to know what are some resources when it comes to policy and advocacy work. I mentioned 2 books I quoted from, and I'll just mention them again because I think they're just great books. The first one is Evicted, Poverty and Profit in the American City. And so that's a book written by Matthew Desmond. He follows several renters, tenants in Milwaukee. In Milwaukee, you know, you can substitute Milwaukee for Louisville. Honestly, very similar history when it comes to housing, housing discrimination, housing segregation, race riot. It's a very similar city. And it's a great read, I think, for just anyone. Very interesting characters. People are at, you know, the Greyhound station trying to find a roommate because their roommate was incarcerated last night. They need somebody else to pick up the bills. And it's just kind of a great story to understand how these people get in a situation of being evicted and houseless. So I recommend that book. And the last book that I quoted was from The Color of Law. And that's a forgotten history of how our government segregated America. And that's written by Richard Rothstein. And of course, he is talking about laws and policies that have played out through our nation's history across the United States, mainly talking about de jure segregation. It does mention some Louisville history in the book that I think a lot of people will find interesting. So I haven't followed the chat because I'm not very good at looking at 2 things. But if there's questions or wants to read maybe some of the chat comments, I'm happy to go back.
Ashley, yes, I will go and start. There are some questions in the chat. So thank you for your presentation. We have about 10 minutes left for questions. And one of the questions that Barbara is asking is, what is the eviction rate for the state of Kentucky?
So the eviction rate for the state of Kentucky is on par with the rest of the country. It's about 2.4%, I think. It's just Louisville and Jefferson County where we see double the national rate.
Mm-hmm. And do you know the rate of evictions for older adults, people 60 plus?
I do not know what that looks like for 60 plus clients.
Andrea is asking, do you foresee a surge in evictions because people won't know what their rights are and how to fight back?
You know, we see a surge in evictions because landlords can't file for evictions and there's no money. People cannot pay rent. And that, I mean, that's just, you know, the rental assistance is, you know, the last I heard, not a lot of people have applied for it like they thought would have applied for it. So I'm not sure if, you know, what we can do to make sure people are aware that they have rental assistance. But it's, you know, the court has said we're not evicting people the first time they show up to eviction court. We're going to give them information to say the landlord and or the tenant can apply for this rental assistance. We are in court, virtually of course, for every docket. Even if we don't have a case, which is very unlikely now, because we're taking every case that calls us, but we are in court. There is at least one attorney and or a paralegal at the 9 o'clock hour, at the 10 o'clock hour, and at the 11 o'clock hour. And the last Kentucky Supreme Court order mentioned working with Legal Aid Society and knowing your rights. The judges all at the eviction court, particularly in Jefferson County, where there's that represents 50% of the evictions in Kentucky. The judges, they all know us. We've had a relationship for a very long time and seem to be at a point more and more with the evictions to say, maybe you should speak to the Legal Aid Society. Let's, you know, continue your case for a couple of weeks, go talk to Legal Aid. Here's their number, 502-584-1254. So that's an option. At Legal Aid Society also, if people are unable to attend court virtually because they don't have internet access, they don't have a computer, they have slow Wi-Fi, you know, disruptive service on their cell phone, whatever it is, they can come to our office. Of course, you know, they need to call and tell us they're coming so we can get it set up, but they can come to our office and attend court virtually as well. We have set up a conference room as like a virtual courtroom, if you will, to provide that service to people. So we're trying to get the word out as much as we can about resources and where people can go, what people can do. Hopefully you all as advocates and in your various fields can also refer people to us or to other organizations to find resources.
So Mary is asking, why did eviction restrictions get lifted when there are still so many issues of unemployment? Doesn't seem that our systems are working together. And then she just said, I know I'm preaching to the choir.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, it's like barking up the same tree. You know, preaching to the choir here. Yeah, it's very hard for many, I think, housing advocates to really understand how can we move forward with evictions. And you know that people don't have the unemployment insurance yet. We know, like, I think WDRB published a story just yesterday or the day before from Ernst & Young that's, you know, kind of overseeing the overhaul of the unemployment is saying, like, there's thousands of people who are still in the queue. We know this, so why are we doing this? It's a good question.
Yeah. And Barbara is also making a similar comment, is saying, in the current situation that we are in, people who have not worked since March, how will they ever catch up?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I think, problematic. It's one of the reasons why we decided at Legal Aid Society to just take cases for non-payment of rent. Generally speaking, so beforehand, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, beforehand, if someone hadn't paid their rent, that's not a case that we would take, because there is no legal defense to not paying rent. The judge says, why are we here today? The landlord's attorney says they haven't paid rent for 4 months. The judge says, okay, you're evicted. You have 7 days before the sheriff's going to come remove your things. And that was kind of the end of the story. And that was just it, because there's no legal defense. And people would say, can't you stand up and say something? The judge won't call on us. There's nothing we can say. You can be hit by a bus. It can be the most tragic story. They were in a coma. They had no idea. It can be just very, like, the wildest facts you can possibly think of that says this person should not be evicted. It's not their fault. We would not take the case because the judge would not even hear it. There is no legal defense to not paying rent. So we never took those cases. Now we're taking all the cases and we're like, we're going to fight something. We don't know what the strategy is. We don't know what we're going to do. You know, we're going to look at, are there mortgages in forbearance? Are there, can we ask for a jury trial? Can we, you know, get rental assistance and make a negotiation, a plea agreement, pay $50 on the late rent over time? You know, we really don't know, because evictions just started last week. And so we're kind of in the middle of seeing how this is going to play out. You know, so the cases have been continued because the court said you got to mediate and then come back in 14 days. So we're trying to see, you know, what we can do legally to stop it. But the law is the law, and you know, there's only certain laws that protect tenants' rights. And so, you know, we're still figuring out what that looks like and how judges are going to come down on it.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashley. We really appreciate all of your wisdom that you shared with us. There's one more question in the chat that's specifically directed to Dr. Furman that I'm going to ask now. And it's Andrea who's asking, can you take a moment to clarify the rumor spreading a misinterpreted report that only 6% of COVID-19 deaths were actually from COVID? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's really just a misrepresentation. I mean, COVID deaths, it's all how people look at death certificates, and sometimes on death certificates there's other comorbidities listed, but you know, we're all trying to use the same standard nationally of what we consider a COVID death. And so even if they have comorbidities, they really did die of COVID, you know, because definitely people with heart disease, lung disease are at higher risk of dying, but they wouldn't have died if they didn't have COVID. So they really, you know, it's true that they are dying because of COVID. So that's not a misrepresentation. That's the truth. And actually, I think more people should be listed as COVID deaths. I think it's really, overall, we're underestimating the COVID deaths, because especially in geriatrics and in older adults, you know, dementia, all this isolation and loneliness, people's dementia is progressing more rapidly and they're dying. And even just regular people, not even the people with dementia that have loneliness, they're not getting out, they're not going to their doctor. People die of loneliness. So I think COVID is contributing to a lot of deaths, and that's not showing up on any death certificate. So really COVID's affecting people's health a lot more than what the statistics are showing. So yeah, I think it's, you know, and it's always like if any big disaster, you know, how are you counting the deaths during wars or hurricanes or all this stuff? And so I think over time, this will all play out and we'll get more information and more data mining and things. But no, the death numbers are true that are out there. So. Well,
Thank you for that feedback. We are at 11 o'clock. I want to thank Ashley again for her wonderful presentation and answering all our questions. We really appreciate all the work that you all are doing. And Joe is putting in the chat, let's make sure we support Ashley's restaurant. She's at zibabistro.com. You can see here in the chat, there is the little website to her restaurant, and we will be going there soon, Ashley. We will try and support you. Thank you so much for everything and for a wonderful morning of discussion. Thanks.